World War II was a long and grueling war. New technologies were invented. Tanks, planes, artillery guns, and soldiers tore cities apart. It was a horrific 6 years of fighting. But on June 6, 1944, 1,600,000 Allied troops invaded the beaches of Normandy. This day would ultimately turn the tides of the war and would begin the end of World War II in Europe. That day would be known as D-Day. In 1939, Germany invaded Poland using a new way of warfare, blitzkrieg or lightning war. The United Kingdom and France swore to stand with Poland if Germany invaded, so they declared war on Germany. As the invasion of Poland had begun, the British and French armies started to dig in along the French borders, getting ready for Germany's next attack. They thought it would be trench-to-trench warfare like in World War I. The winter of 1939 was known as the Phony War because of such little fighting. After conquering Poland, Germany turns its attention to Western Europe. Allied troops tried to defend, but the speed and power of the German forces were overwhelming. The Netherlands and Belgium fell less than a month. After 6 months of fighting, the Germans sent a huge invasion that split the French and British armies apart. Soon, the British armies retreated to the port of Dunkirk, and the French army surrendered, resulting with France being overrun. Luckily, most of the British army was saved during the rescue of Dunkirk, but most of their equipment was left behind. Hitler's army had now taken over much of Western Europe and saw that the only other obstacle in his way was England. Hitler sent his air forces to attack London. This fight would later be known as the Battle of Britain, as the Royal Air Force and the Luftwaffe clashed at each other in the skies. As Germany failed to seize Britain, he turned his attention to Russia. Later on, as the war raged on, Joseph Stalin, the dictator of Russia, saw that his country was suffering from the Nazi invasion. Stalin knew that his army couldn't hold on forever and needed support, so in November of 1943, 6 months before D-Day, the leaders of the most powerful Allied nations, Joseph Stalin, Winston Churchill, and Franklin D. Roosevelt, met in Tehran to discuss about the war. In the meeting, Stalin pushed on about opening a western front to the war. After some dispute, the decision was made for Operation Overlord. General Dwight D. Eisenhower would be put in charge for the operation. This would soon be one of the most amphibious operations in human history. The second thing to agree on was where the invasion would take place. There were two options: the Pas de Calais or the beaches of Normandy. These were the two chosen because the Allies could ship troops from Britain's coastline to an invasion in less than a day. In 1942, Canadian troops tried to raid the port of Dieppe. This ended horribly, with 4,000 casualties and many of the Canadian soldiers taken as POWs. This taught the Allies two things: never invade a German-occupied port, and to make sure the Germans weren't prepared. So from this understanding, the Allied generals agreed and chose Normandy. The Pas de Calais was the obvious place to land. Although the Pas de Calais was the smallest crossing point between Allied territory and France, it had slope terrain and strong German defenses. The Allies wanted the element of surprise on their side, so Normandy it was. In a meeting at Washington, D.C. in April of 1943, FDR and Churchill decided on the date of an invasion: summer of 1944. Now it was up to Eisenhower to plan the invasion. Allied Canadian, American, and British troops would land on the beaches codenamed Omaha, Utah, Juno, Sword, and Gold. Once the troops made it inland, they would have to invade the rest of France, and in order to get equipment onto shore, artificial docks called mulberries were created that could be towed across the sea. Amazing vehicles called funnies created by Percy Hobart helped the Allies get through ditches, craters, and rough terrain. The Allies needed to convince the Germans into thinking that the invasion would happen in Normandy, so Operation Fortitude began. Operation Fortitude was a deception plan to make the Germans think that the invasion would happen at the Pas de Calais. To do this, the Allies placed the 1st U.S. Army Group at the coastal edge of Britain near the Pas de Calais. They were led by General George S. Patton. He was the new leader of a ghost army. This army was all fake and full of dummies: blow-up tanks, landing crafts, and trucks, wood aircraft, and artillery weapons. These would all make the Germans think that there was an army ready to invade the Pas de Calais. Even fake tank tracks, tank noises, and radio messages were used to trick the Germans. The Germans were well aware that an invasion of Europe would soon come, and if they were able to defeat it, it would mean they won the war. The problem for them was where and when they would land. To keep the Germans thinking that the invasion wouldn't happen at Normandy, British double agents told them that the Pas de Calais would be the prime invasion spot. Normandy would just be a diversion. One of them was codenamed Garbo. The Germans, of course, were convinced. In 1942, the Germans built a line of defenses called the Atlantic Wall. Led by Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, he made the Atlantic Wall stronger than ever. To allow for a counterattack if an invasion occurred, Rommel wanted the Panzer reserves near the beaches, but another Field Marshal, Georg von Rundstedt, wanted them near Paris. After a lot of fighting, Hitler put 3 Panzer divisions with Rommel and kept the rest of Paris. They could be only moved by Hitler's commands. Finally, the scheduled day came, June 5, 1944. After the invasion, the Germans would send reinforcements to push the Allies back. To delay that, Allied bombers and the French resistance destroyed crucial bridges, roads, and railways. As 3,000 ships set course for Normandy, the weather changed. This was a big problem and a great benefit. Eisenhower didn't know what to do. With these conditions, the invasion couldn't happen. But the weather forecasters told him it would be better on the 6th. Because of the storm, many German generals thought the Allied invasion couldn't happen if they were to invade in this weather. So many took vacations and spent time at home. Rommel would go home to his wife, which was a grave mistake. Without generals to command soldiers, German defenses were weakened. Now the invasion has started. In the earliest hours of D-Day, paratroopers started to land. Thousands of paratroopers would capture road crossings, bridges, and more. About 13,000 American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions landed that night. Unluckily, anti-aircraft fire, smoke, and a lot of other factors scatter the planes and paratroopers around. Although the paratrooper land doesn't go according to plan, some groups of soldiers pull together and get the job done. The Allies even threw tinfoil and fake paratroopers at the Pas de Calais to keep the German scanners thinking there was an invasion going on there. Just before the invasion, bombers try to soften up the German defenses, but as 13,000 bombs are dropped, not a single German is killed. Ships start filling up landing crafts. In the morning mist, Germans report seeing shapes in the sea. Thousands of silhouettes are seen by the Germans. As landing crafts head towards the beach, many soldiers get seasick because of the meal they had this morning, and are less battle ready. When the first wave of soldiers hit the beach, they get slaughtered. As more waves come, soldiers get desperate and jump over the sides of the craft. Many soldiers drown in the sea. In some cases, the water protected the soldiers because of their resistance, and stopped the bullets in less than a yard. Soldiers get behind what little cover they had. M42s spit thousands of bullets at the soldiers. Artillery guns and mines blew soldiers apart. Some of the beaches were 1,000 feet long. Amazing floating D-Day tanks were used to provide cover, but many of them sank from the strong waves. The first beaches to be invaded were Utah and Omaha. On Utah Beach, the Americans landed on the wrong place. But luckily for them, a great man called Teddy Roosevelt Jr., the oldest son of Teddy Roosevelt, was there. He helped round up the troops on Utah Beach and was rewarded the Medal of Honor. It turned out landing in the wrong place was helpful because the location they were in was less fortified. The worst beach was Omaha. It had stronger German defenses and higher cliffs, but soldiers still made it through. On the beaches there were barbed wire string to keep the soldiers from advancing. To get around this, explosives called bangalores were created. On the beaches Juno Sword and Gold, things went smoothly. On a cliffside called Point du Hoc, German artillery guns were a big threat. These guns overlooked Utah and Omaha Beach and could decimate the incoming soldiers, so a team of specialists scaled the cliffs. Although it wasn't easy, once the Allies made it atop they found that the guns were gone, but soon the Allies found them in a field unguarded. As soldiers fought, they soon swept the Germans out of the bunkers and made beachheads. Allied battleships provided support fire, and by the end of the day all the beaches were successfully captured. About 11,000 men were either wounded or killed in all of the beaches combined. Many soldiers call D-Day the longest day. D-Day still has some speculation about what the D meant, but many say it has no meaning. On the German side, reports come in telling the German generals about the invasion. They quickly try to activate the Panzer reserves, but they can only be moved by Hitler, and Hitler was sound asleep. Since no one had the guts to wake him up, no reinforcements came on D-Day. After Hitler woke up, he was signaled that the Allies had invaded. Hitler didn't release the reinforcements at first because they still believed that Normandy was a diversion, but after seeing how big the invasion was, he quickly let them out. But due to the great job of the bombers and French, it took 2 days for the reinforcements to get there. After D-Day, 2 million more men would land on the beaches. The mulberries supplied the troops moving inland with supplies. The Allies would continue to invade the rest of Europe. 11 months after D-Day, the Allies would surround Berlin and World War II in Europe would end. After that, General Eisenhower retired from the army and became the 34th President of the United States. Rommel would be forced to commit suicide and Roosevelt Jr. would die from a heart attack while advancing in Europe. If D-Day had failed, many experts say it would have increased the war by a year, ending in 1946. D-Day was probably one of the most important and amazing battles in all of history, and our lives might not be the same if these brave soldiers didn't fight back. If there was a contest of a battle with wits, courage, and bravery, D-Day would come out on top.